Morning. So here I am. Thank you for inviting me up here. You may think you had nothing to do with that, but the only reason I think Leon feels comfortable inviting so many people up here is because he knows, as we all know, that you're a very inviting community, that you're an open community, that you're willing to hear from lots of different voices. And so we've already started that with Kimball last week, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of it this month. So thank you for being such a welcoming and inviting community. My wife and I, Sam, Liam is here too, and we have two older boys. We've been here since 2004, so quite a while. Many of you know me. For those of you who don't or who are visiting today for the first time, welcome. But I'm not a preacher, actually, turns out. I'm a professor. But that, I don't know, that sort of prepares you for being up here, but not really. I haven't gone to seminary. I haven't studied theology. But like many of you, I've spent quite a lot of my life trying to live into God's purposes for us, for me as a person, for us as a community, and trying to live into the church in that way. So hopefully I've learned something along the way that I can share with you that will be helpful to you. It'll be at least worth the price of admission, I'm sure. So anyway, the one thing that's different, really different about this from what I normally do is that you can't stop me. You can't raise your hand. But I'd like to say, look, if you do hear me saying something that sounds weird or is unclear, or if I'm going too fast, just raise your hand. You know, I know, where's Bill? Bill, he'll probably take me up on that. Anyway, so we'll see how it goes. But let's pray then quickly for God's guidance as we get into the message today. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be pleasing in your sight. Amen. So here's a quick outline of what we're going to do today, so you know where you're going and where I'm going. Zechariah, in our first reading, is telling the Israelites to rejoice. That's how he opens, rejoice, because the king is already here. But it's often really hard to rejoice. All we have to do is look around at the world, at our own lives, and we can see that the kingdom is not fully here, not yet. At the same time, if we look carefully enough, as Beth was just inviting us to do, we can see that the kingdom is also already here in a million different ways, and a million different places, both in the cosmic and the big stuff with governments and weather events and so on, and in the personal and the intimate and the individual. So how do we live into that gap between the not yet and the already here? In Matthew, which is another of our readings today, we're going to hear Jesus saying, "Come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." And in Zechariah, we're going to hear God telling God's people through the prophet, "Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double." So that's the theme, prisoners of hope, bound to hope. So here's the short answer. Rejoice then in the kingdom that is already here, and as you work on the kingdom that is not yet, on the not yet part of the kingdom, return to your stronghold, get back to basics, to the teaching and example of Christ, to his gentleness and humility, and be bound to hope as you bring about the kingdom that is not yet. So that's it. That's the answer. If you were my students, you'd be packing up your laptops, heading for the door. That's what's going to be on the test. Anyway, let's start then. Let's build that out a little bit. And we'll start with the first reading. The reading is from Zechariah, chapter 9, verses 9 through 12. "Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. So notice just in that short passage, the change in tenses, right? There's the gap there already. The king is already here. Rejoice now. The king is triumphant. But there's also the not yet, the things he will do, the things that are left to do. And that's the gap we're going to be looking at today. So as for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double. So that's where he starts. Rejoice greatly because the kingdom is already at hand. The king is already here. The king comes to us triumphant and victorious, humble, but triumphant. We read that passage, of course, as we're New Testament people. We always read that passage as pointing ahead, right, to Palm Sunday and the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. But today we're going to stick with this message. The kingdom is here now. You rejoice, your king is here, victorious. But it's really hard to sustain that joy often. We know the kingdom is not yet here, not yet triumphant. Certainly the Israelites of Zechariah's age knew that. They had experienced the fall of Jerusalem, the exile in Babylon. They're worried that Alexander the Great is coming south. They don't know what's going to happen. A lot of things are happening. They live in fear in a lot of ways. And all of us often feel the same way, right? We feel the not yet in our own lives. All of us are brought face to face with things that both big and small really make us question whether the king is victorious, whether the king is already triumphant. But the work that I do, my own research, often takes me into these sorts of places, places of human suffering and struggle. So let me tell you a little bit about that. I'm a professor of law and politics. I study other countries, and I study things like human rights violations, constitutional rights, the sort of construction and failure of democracies, all the terrible things that people can do to other people. My first book was about police killings in Latin America. I spent 4 years probably just diving into that every day, reading hundreds of reports of police killings, talking to the parents of young men or even children who had been killed by the police, talking to activists who felt every day the frustration of knowing that this was happening, that it was going to continue happening, that nobody was doing anything about it. I face that not yet of the kingdom every day. And even now, I don't do that anymore, but lately I've been meeting often with researchers and activists from Africa who are working on LGBTQ rights, and they're fighting the kind of oppression that we think sometimes doesn't even exist anymore. Uganda in May passed a law that imposes the death penalty for something they call aggravated homosexuality. You can get 20 years for encouraging or promoting homosexuality. Things are pretty grim for a lot of people in many countries in Africa. And the people that I work with are fighting that every day, often at a great cost and great risk to themselves. And what's even worse sometimes, especially for me when I go into these places, is that Christians from the U.S. have had a hand in building the politics around that. So it's hard to see then the king triumphant in the middle of all that. And the not yet part of the kingdom is not just about bad people doing bad things, where we can kind of find the villains. Today, our sister congregation in Manyamula, the one we just heard about, right? They've heard from us this very day, maybe about 7 or 8 hours ago. They're probably still going. Anyway, but those people who are our siblings, right, in Christ, this past February and March, they experienced a 5-week-long cyclone that broke sort of world records for its storms. The cyclone killed 1,500 people. Croplands were flooded, crops ruined, homes were destroyed, food prices went up 300 or 400%. 500,000 people were displaced. And not just that, but the cyclone hit Malawi in the middle of the worst cholera epidemic they had ever experienced in their history. So you can imagine what the flooding and the displacement did to all those people. So, the kingdom is not yet fully here. We've received emails from them on the mission committee expressing worry, concern, fear that there's not enough food, that people are going to go hungry in our own family. So, even though there are siblings, they seem really far away sometimes, and a lot of these things that happen seem to be happening to other people in other places, but actually, of course, we can find that kind of the sort of police violence, the anti-LGBT sentiment, poverty, sickness, and want in our own country, in our own city. I was out yesterday with the Mobilosa Fishes truck, and it was pretty clear that the kingdom was not yet here. There were a lot of people. We ran out of food after 2 stops. People were hot. People were on edge. People have been chased around a lot from one place to another. It really felt hard out there yesterday. So, and of course we feel that not just out there in the world, but we feel it in our own lives, right? All of us have places in our own lives that are the not yet of the kingdom. The kingdom is cosmic, it's global, it involves governments and cyclones and whatnot, but it also involves the sort of personal and the intimate in our own lives. You might feel sickness that you don't know how you're going to overcome, or weakness that deprives you of all the things that give you most joy in your life. You might feel depression. All of us have watched loved ones, people we love, suffer and lose hope and get sick. The kingdom is not yet here. And wow, that whole message took a really dark turn after starting with rejoice, right? But it's hard to rejoice, and we should rejoice with our eyes wide open. And we should know that there's a lot of darkness in the world, but the darkness is not the whole story, right? It's never the whole story. So remember Malawi? Here's a little bit of a report on the response to the cholera epidemic and the cyclone. By the end of April 2023, humanitarian partners had reached 1.6 million people affected by cholera or Cyclone Freddy. At least 1.2 million people got safe water, access to sanitation, and so on. About 600,000 children were helped to return to school and are now learning again. About 235,000 people were reached with food and livelihood assistance. Some 120,000 people received health assistance. There's little bits of the kingdom, right, peeking through. And in fact, it's often in the not yet that we can see the already there in our response to the not yet. In many African countries, as I said, LGBTQ rights are in really serious trouble. But in Latin America, which started more or less in the same place, things are looking a lot better through the work of a lot of really committed people, a lot of activists who put effort and work into this. We can see the kingdom peeking through everywhere. People are more protected, they have better access to health, and there are laws often protecting them now. So, remember I said, this is my favorite part of this message today. The kingdom is both cosmic, right? It involves the whole world in the universe, and personal. It's personal and intimate. So I just got back from Colorado, and watch, I'm going to use this message to tell you about my granddaughter. I went to Colorado to visit my son and my daughter-in-law and my granddaughter. She's my first granddaughter. She's 3 years old. She's beautiful. She's blonde and blue-eyed, and she's about this tall. She loves to watch monster truck shows on YouTube. She loves to race her little balance bike around a BMX track, right, with big hills and everything. She's a little bossy. She also likes to run down trails, like just run down the trails, but then she stops and she makes me bend down and smell the flowers that are right by the path. I mean, all these things happened while I was in Colorado, and maybe best of all, she loves to kind of snuggle into my chest and read books with me. So yeah, there's the kingdom, right? Sometimes the kingdom shines through so brightly it makes your eyes water. So I think all of us probably have similar moments, right? Where we see the kingdom peeking through, both in the cosmic and the personal. And all of us that have to live into that space that Kimball described last week, right, as the gap between the already and the not yet. And actually, that's where the church lives every day, right? That's the tension that the church lives into, and we are called to live into that tension too, to live into the gap between the not yet and the already. So how do we do this? As Kimball told us last week, we can't do nothing, right? We're called to be God's tools. We're called to build the kingdom. We can't just get comfortable with the gap, find ways to live with it. We need to work to bridge it. And if we're living thoughtfully at all, the gap will make us often uncomfortable. And of course, Christians respond to that discomfort in different ways. This isn't a new thing. A lot of Christians have always disagreed about how to respond to that gap. And we're going to see a little bit of that in the second reading for today, in the Matthew reading. So I want to put up that second reading because it does have a little bit more to say to us today. So Matthew 11, we're reading two little pieces from verses 16 through 19 and then 25 through 30. But to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We wailed and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. At that time, Jesus said, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent, and have revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So there's a ton of stuff in this passage, and I'm just going to focus on a little tiny bit of it. I want to focus more on the tail end of that, right? The advice that Jesus gives us. Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. So what are our two readings, if we put them together, what do they tell us about how we can live into that gap? There's some things I think we can't or shouldn't, or things that I think are probably a bad idea. We can't refuse to see some of the many ways in which the world has never been and still isn't right. Right? Sometimes we see Christians who are kind of trying to gloss everything over, and I think we can't do that. We have to be willing to open our eyes and see the not yet, wherever it happens to be, even if it makes us uncomfortable. In fact, Zechariah himself points to many ways in which the world still has to be made right for the Israelites, right? We can't become so disillusioned that we give up hope, right? Zechariah speaks directly against that, right? Hold on to hope, he says. Rejoice. And for the stuff that I look at, which is sort of politics and rights and how they get worked out, right? I think one of the things that's most striking to me is the way in which a lot of churches and maybe the ones, I don't know if it's a lot, I don't know if it's a majority, but the ones that are getting the most press these days, the ones that are most visible to us often, those are the churches that decide that the world is in just so much trouble and there's so much sin in the world that we have to fight by any means necessary, right? That these are the end times and we just have to fix it somehow, and it doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process. Right? So that God can finally get what God wants thanks to our hard work. On my way to see my granddaughter, on my way, we drove by this church that had a big sign in front of it, and it said, if we want God to bless America, we have to stop legalizing sin, right? So that church, right, like so many churches, has decided what God wants, and has decided that God only gets what God wants when we put the power of the sword behind it. When we get the government to punish the people we think are doing the wrong thing. To be honest, I guess in this church, we probably think we're better than that. We know better. But we often want to take things into our own hands as well, in big and small ways. On a personal level, we might think that holding on to hope is just an effort of will. It's up to us. On a more cosmic level, maybe it's easy to start thinking that we need to use all means necessary ourselves because, those other people, they're so wrong. Am I right? So what is the call then from our two readings today? The call from Zechariah, interestingly, is not onward Christian soldiers, right? It's like almost the opposite of that. It's return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. The call from Jesus in Matthew is not take up the sword if you want God's blessing. It's take my yoke upon you and learn from me. There's a binding, there's a submission in both of those messages. So what does that look like in our everyday lives? What does that look like when we try to live that out? The first thing, I think, and this is, I think, foundational to the rest of it, the very first thing that Zechariah says is rejoice. Rejoice greatly, for your king comes to you. And he said that not to people who were in a happy place necessarily, right? He said that to a people who had suffered the fall of Jerusalem, the exiles, attacks from the hostile powers. Zechariah knows all that, and he says it anyway. So the number one thing is, don't let the not yet rob you of the already. Find the joy in the glimpses of the kingdom that's already here. Those moments with my granddaughter, they fill me with joy. It's not an effort of will. I can't help it. I'm bound to joy. I'm a prisoner of joy in those moments. And all of us have moments like that, right? Whether it's meals with friends, from the trivial to the sublime, right? It could be singing in church, if you're really a churchy person, or it could be really meals and time with family and time with friends and beautiful snow-capped mountains on your drive somewhere, or diving into cold water on a hot day. So many, many places to find it. Seek out those moments and rejoice because the kingdom is already here, and that joy is in many ways the foundation for the rest of it. The second thing is we hear God telling Israel through the prophet, return to your stronghold. So what does that mean? I think it means get back to basics. Right? Who's our stronghold? Our stronghold is Christ himself. And when we read Matthew, he says, don't trust your own wisdom, learn from me. Back to basics means following what Christ himself called the greatest commandment. And I think our church has really sort of put that front and center, right? We in the church call that love God, love everybody. I think that's back to basics, right? Resting on Christ's great commandment. Don't be distracted by the superficial stuff, like the Israelites who are calling to each other in the marketplace, right? I don't like this guy because he eats and drinks with sinners, and I don't like that guy because he's too dour and he won't even eat or drink at all. Let your deeds show that you love God and love everybody. Work that out, and that's how we seek out the kingdom that is not yet and that is coming into existence. And finally, he says, be prisoners of hope. And this might be the hardest thing of all. I confess, for me, often it's hard to be bound to hope in that way. It's easy to lose the hope. But I think being prisoners of hope means that it's really not so much an effort of will. It's not like a character thing, whereas we just do it right, we'll have enough hope. It means we surrender to hope, that we're bound to it. And how does that happen? So I think it happens through the combination of all these things we've been talking about. I really believe that if we act out of joy and gratitude for the kingdom already here, and we act out of sorrow and compassion for the ways in which the kingdom is not yet here, and we follow Christ's example and we seek every day to love God and love everybody with gentleness and humility, then truly, as God promises, in this day, God will restore to us double. We will find joy in the kingdom that's already here. We'll find hope in our work to bring about the kingdom not yet here, and we'll find rest in the presence of Christ in our lives. So take this with you then as you leave here to live into the gap between the already here and the not yet. Remember this: return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double. Thanks. Let's have a quick prayer. O Lord, guide us all back to our stronghold and help us to be prisoners of hope even when things don't look all that great. Prisoners of hope when we rejoice in the traces of the kingdom that are all around us. And prisoners of hope when we take Christ's yoke upon us to find rest. Amen.